Okay, then we'll look at the other two dependencies. We looked at physical and informational dependencies between elements of a system, and we defined these dependencies as a one-way thing. Otherwise it's not a dependency, it is interdependency, right? So the third category of dependencies is geographical dependencies. A geographical dependency is a dependency in which two elements of the human environment systems are located in such a way that a local event can affect them simultaneously. This type of dependency is, in other words, not arising from the two elements being dependent on the actual functioning of each other, as in physical or informational dependencies, but instead from their spatial proximity. For example, a poor household living just next to a railroad may not in any way be dependent on the trains, but the geographical proximity make both liable to be affected by the same disruptive event. Such an event may be independent from the elements themselves, such as an explosion of a passing truck with hazardous material, or originate from one of the two elements, such as the derailment of the train that may end up hitting the house. The main thing is that both elements are affected as a result of their location. Okay, we can think of many examples in the real world as well. Of course, living by the train track is a very real example, as we already saw. The last and the most difficult category of dependencies to grasp is logical dependencies. A logical dependency is a dependency in which the state of one element in the human environment system depends on the state of another through a mechanism that is not physical, informational, or geographical. This may initially appear as a way of covering for everything else, but logical dependencies are often the most difficult to grasp and play vital roles in human environment systems. For example, an increasing proportion of Europeans choose to use IP telephone over their traditional domestic landlines, knowing that this new technology will not function in a power cut. The common reasoning behind this decision, that's the internet phone, is that if the phone stops working in an emergency, they will use their mobile phone to communicate. However, if suddenly a substantially greater part of the population than usual attempts to use their mobile phones simultaneously, the network will be overloaded and reduce the proportion of successful calls. Other examples of logical dependencies are gridlock traffic in Sao Paulo on rainy days due to more people driving, fluctuations in the stock market due to rumors of the poor health of a CEO, or reduced traffic congestion as a result of increased fuel price, and riots due to the publication of a caricature of a prophet or another prophet on another continent. So this is alluding to the cartoon on a particular religious figure in France. Logical dependencies are, in other words, related to human expectations, decisions, and behavior, and not to any material or informational input or spatial location. This typology of dependencies is helpful to keep in mind when constructing human environment systems to grasp the complexity of our world, especially as it aids us by constantly reminding us not to forget the less tangible dependencies, the dependencies that may be the ones giving rise to the most surprising dynamics in terms of, let's say, the deviations, the risks that pull you away from the trajectory of sustainable development, for example. Okay, so we'll come back and look at more things, but here is the prop. The change on the stock market was logically dependent on the rumors concerning the health of Steve Jobs, the late CEO of Apple. Why does that happen? People's logical thinking is that Steve is a critical player in the success of the company Apple that he was the CEO of. If he should somehow be incapacitated or disappear, then their stock was going to be not worth much, because Apple stock was going to collapse because the products would stop selling products and so on and so forth. So that's a logical connection, not physical, not even informational. While rumor is an information, but the dependency is not based on the value of the information, but the logic of how that information affects decisions. So I hope you understand the difference. So this is a bit short, but oops, let's continue. It's a little too short. Let's continue with the hierarchy. See, wholeness. I have a frog in my throat. We'll continue with wholeness, hierarchy, and multiplicity of descriptions, which are important when we want to construct a model of the human environment systems. Challenge when constructing human environment systems in relation to issues of risk, resilience, and sustainability is to include enough information to sufficiently capture the complexity of the context, referred to as the principle of wholeness, while limiting it to what is relevant in light of the purpose of the analysis and resources available. So let's say we're trying to be sustainable about water or energy or food, then how you represent the wholeness of that problem, but not including everything in the human environment system that is not directly related to the particular sector that you are looking at. Although chapter 5 presents the principles behind finding such a balance, the primary concern for making boundary judgments is relevance to what we address and to what we want to accomplish. Okay, so sustainability of water is closely related to sustainability of food, because water, 70% of the fresh water often gets used for irrigation, for producing food, but often water management is dealt with as a separate entity for simplicity and for because we work in silos. Parts of the world that are not directly a part of the human environment system we are constructing, but still influence or are influenced by it to a degree deemed relevant, may be referred to as belonging to the surrounding of the system. What distinguishes these elements in the surrounding from the elements within the system itself is that it is only their transboundary relations with the human environment system that are of interest, and not the dependencies among themselves. So you want to just catch what are going to affect your human environment system as focused on a particular problem. For instance, it may be relevant to include how changing global weather patterns may impact foods in a municipality, but it's probably not relevant to include the global causal factors of climate change into the municipal risk analysis. You know what change is happening, and you use that information without worrying about what is causing those changes. In short, it is the purpose of our analysis and the resources available that determines how the human environment system is demarcated. So in reality, it's a zero-sum game, so often you have to optimize your resources for your analysis based on your goal so that you don't go all over the place. Let's read one more. Constructing human environment systems in relation to issues of risk, resilience, and sustainability is likely to result in a web of elements and dependencies that is complex and essentially impossible to grasp. It is therefore necessary to introduce the principle of hierarchy, which states that human environment systems are hierarchical in the sense that system of interest is part of a system on a higher level and is made up of systems on a lower level as well. Most systems in our world are okay, that's one sentence by itself. Most systems in our world are hierarchical. Okay, this hierarchy plays a vital role in grasping complexity, since it makes it possible to simplify a human environment system by aggregating sets of interdependent elements into subsystems, so we can deal with it as components, as opposed to a watch, which may be one whole system that has to be done together. But when you take it to a repairman, he's going to look at it and see which component is not working and try to help you fix it, right? So interdependencies do exist in the subcomponents or the subsystem. This enables us to describe and explain the behavior of an element or subsystem at any particular level with no need for a detailed representation of, and with only moderate concern for the structures and the behavior on levels above and below. So you have to consider the whole system. The wholeness is important, but you need to still be able to simplify for accomplishing your purpose. For example, a community may be dependent on job opportunities at a local factory for livelihood of many families. This calls for including the factory when constructing a human environment system to analyze flood risk. However, analyzing flood risk in the community is not likely to require any detailed descriptions of the various departments, administrative processes, or production methods of the factory unless they depended on water and so on. In other words, the factory is in this context treated as an element in the more general model of the community, though being a complex system in itself when looking more closely. So factory is complicated with machines, workers, their interactions, managers, functionality, product design, deliverables, and so on. But if you want to relate it to society around that depends on it and the flood risk, then you have to chop it up into different pieces. Okay, so let's read this as well. In addition to the principles of wholeness and hierarchy, large complex systems require a third principle when building our human environment system, the principle of multiplicity of descriptions. So not everybody perceives the system the same way. This principle states that to represent any large and complex part of our world requires constructing a range of different descriptions, each of which only covers certain aspects of the wholeness and hierarchy of the human environment systems. Maybe the old allegory about blind men and the elephant comes to mind. One person is catching the tail and saying elephant is like a rope, another one is catching the leg and saying elephant is like a pillar, and so on and so forth. The principle of multiplicity of descriptions becomes particularly important in the context of this book, as it entails a wide range of agents and often integrating various analysis. This requires the human environment system to be explicit, since effective collaboration depends on having a shared vision of what to accomplish together. Okay, so that's long enough. Now we'll come back and look at structural models and functional models, because when we keep saying constructing human environment system, we only mean here how to model it so that we can analyze it and figure out the risks and ways to deal with the risks, so that we can again go back to remaining on the trajectory for sustainable development. Okay, so a very nice chapter with lots of nice definitions. Per Becker, who's at the Lund University, I think in Sweden. Where is Lund University? I should know that. It's a bit sad that my geography is that bad. I think I'm right. It's in Sweden. That's a very, yeah, Sweden. So I'm not that bad. Okay, see you in the next podcast.